and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. And you may have noticed in that opening sequence, Staceyann Chin, performance artist, activist, author, and she, who is doing a new one-woman show off Broadway, MotherStruck, and her director, yes, Cynthia Nixon, are here this week on this show.
Just have to hang in here with us for a half hour, and then you can see Staceyann and Cynthia.
And it's a great interview. We have taped it already, and you want to see this one.
Okay, in the news, one of the victims of the attack in San Bernardino was a gay man, Daniel Kaufman, who may have saved 4 other lives through his selfless actions.
And then, of course, we turn the corner to Donald Trump, who is stoking the war on terror by declaring war on Muslims, and some of that echoes for us.
I've declared war on Donald Trump. Transgender icon of the 1970s, Holly Woodlawn of the Andy Warhol factory, has died.
Rhode Island will treat anti-transgender discrimination in the provision of health care as sex discrimination.
Activists rally for the transgender woman who was brutally beaten outside her home in Jackson Heights, Queens.
A tentative settlement, they're going back and forth over this, over a transgender girl's use of the girls' locker room in a Cook County high school may have been reached.
Texas will have to pony up more than $600,000 to lawyers who sued them for marriage equality.
Ireland, this is my favorite story of the week. Ireland has banned discrimination against gay teachers in Catholic schools, while New York City, of course, moves to subsidize anti-gay religious schools with no demands for non-discrimination.
And you think this is a liberal town. 2 big boosts for PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, in the fight against HIV infection this week.
Andy will review Al Pacino in David Mamet's China Doll and celebrates another Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS Gypsy of the Year competition.
Wonderful show.
But we start at the top of the news in this whole realm of terrorism that has so mesmerized all of us in the last few weeks. San Bernardino is, of course, the latest attack as we were taping. Last week it happened as we were taping, so we didn't know about it at the time.
And one of the 14 who were killed was Daniel Kaufman, 42. We have a picture of him there. He proudly wore rainbow earrings for LGBT pride and is survived by his boyfriend, Ryan Reyes, who drove him to work every day since he didn't have a driver's license.
He said he didn't have a driver's license so that Ryan would drive him to work every day, so they got to spend a little more time together.
But Kaufman is credited with saving 4 lives, screaming for people to get out and pushing people out of harm's way before he was shot and killed himself. He was a practicing Wiccan, and he was a regular participant in Renaissance fairs. Now, of course, obviously, we care about all the victims. This is a way to bring it home to our viewers that we certainly are everywhere, and it's
tragic.
Tragic.
He ran the coffee shop in the building there in San Bernardino and trained developmentally disabled workers in the coffee shop.
It was an extremely diverse group of people, a group of Americans who were done in by this horrible thing.
It was, you looked at those 14 people and you saw every race and nationality and gender and sexual orientation. It was really...
So we all feel for that, and we have our own fears, but that doesn't mean that we're going to buy into the fascism of Donald Trump. I mean, at this point, given the things that he's saying, which are so unconstitutional, so un-American, I think the Republican Party ought to delist him, as they did with David Duke. When he won a Republican primary, and they said, you cannot be a Republican. They have to throw him out of the party. He wants to run third party, let him do that. But he should be stigmatized and isolated. I know that he represents a segment of the American population, but this is something that should not be catered to.
Well, he does clearly represent a segment, and it is just horrifying to see what he has given permission to rise from the depths of fear and anger. And it is, it's always been my analysis that what we want is a savior. We want someone who promises to make the world safe and make our lives better. And he's someone who is standing up with all his bluster and saying, I will take care of this.
So I will say to the right-wing people watching our program, some of you monitor us, this is only going to add to terrorism around the world. This is going to fulfill everything ISIS says about us. And it is exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing.
I will also say, however, that there isn't much to pick from among the other Republican candidates, and I'm frankly just as scared of Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and the other right-wing candidates. So to get rid of Trump, as you suggest, first of all, doesn't begin to attack the whole problem in the Republican Party, and is only opening a door from maybe even worse.
Some of my friends, including many I respect, who are saying, oh, you should be celebrating. This is going to help elect a Democrat president of the United States, and Trump will go third party. It's isolating the party, all that kind of stuff. I'm worried about what's happening in the world right now. We have to, as Americans, come together and stop this kind of bigotry if we're going to bring our Muslim brothers and sisters into the fold and solve these problems.
But it's the Americans who are exhibiting the bigotry. So
yes, and that's why I'm saying.
I hope they are a minority, but I'm not convinced
that's why it has to be condemned now.
For those of you who, just a note, for those of you who find some appeal in Trump's promise to protect us all by excluding Muslims temporarily.
You just ask them at the border, are you Muslim? That's all. I mean, it's idiocy.
I will remind you that until fairly recently, LGBT people were by law excluded from coming to this country.
Right. They could stop you at the border and say, get on the next plane back, you are not coming in here. This is in the 1980s. I remember it because we protested about it. And it wasn't solved until the 90s.
And even more recently, and solved only much more recently, people with HIV were legally excluded from this country. The International AIDS Conference was kept out of this country in protest. People's luggage was looked at to see what medicines they were carrying. This can happen to anyone. So lest you think that Trump's suggestion or the other candidates' suggestions to accept only Christian refugees from Syria are good ideas, no, that's exactly the wrong idea. And it can happen and has happened to all of us.
And we lost Holly Woodlawn. Holly Woodlawn was a famous trans actress from Andy Warhol's factory. We have two pictures of Holly there and in her heyday and more recently. She's died at 69 of cancer. She was the star of hits like Trash with Joe D'Alessandro, which I saw as a kid and scandalized me. It was quite an eye-opener, and Women in Revolt. She was also the inspiration for the late Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side song. She died in LA, born in Puerto Rico. Not a big career, but did appear in some indie films and did Transparent recently.
Yes, the Netflix series.
Joe D'Alessandro saw her just before she died, telling her all that love that was sent to her from everyone.
In Palatine, Illinois, we've been following the story of a school board which was upset that a trans student, student, who had been accepted as on girls' sports teams and using the girls' restroom, wanted to be able to change in the girls' locker room and had volunteered to use a curtain to give herself and the other students privacy.
So the federal government basically said, the Education Department, I believe it was, Office of Civil Rights, and they said, no, she has to have all access. You can't require her to go behind a curtain. If she wants to go behind a curtain, she can go behind a curtain. And the school district pushed back, said, no, this girl still has a penis. And they said, they keep using the phrase anatomy is different from gender.
Yeah.
That's the phrase. It's offensive to a lot of people, but that's what they're saying, and they're sticking to that.
So they worked out a settlement this week, or thought they had, and the federal government said, we've settled on our terms, and this makes everybody safe. And the school board said, wait a minute, we just settled on behalf of this one girl, and it doesn't apply to everyone, and it's only because she has agreed to use the curtain.
And so this is Cook County. This is the largest school district in the state.
Palatine, Illinois. So then the school board had a meeting this week to talk about rescinding their agreement to this settlement. And in the end, they decided to stick with the settlement, but by their definition, which is that it applies just to her and just because she's voluntarily agreed to
Right. This is going to be an ongoing battle across the country.
By the way, the New York Times had an interesting article this week about how soldiers wounded in Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, who lost their penises as an injury, are now being offered penile transplants from people who've died. And there was discussion in the article of whether trans men would be able to acquire penis transplants, and the thinking is not yet. You can create a penis out of flesh, but it doesn't work the same way. But this is something they're
looking at,
considering down the road.
Well, there is a California initiative that is now moving forward that prohibits people from using facilities in public buildings except in accordance with their sex at birth, is the way they put it. Gives you a $4,000 fine for the government. It allows businesses to ban employees and patrons from using facilities. It needs 365,800 signatures.
By December 21st.
So we'll see how that plays out.
The assumption is that they will get the signatures, they will have the vote, and, they have a chance of passing it.
And then we'll test the constitutionality of it.
Be the way, another article in the Times this week, which was fascinating, was about how younger men do not want to be naked with each other in locker rooms.
Why is that?
You tell me.
I haven't been to a locker room in a while, as you can tell.
Oh, it's an interesting piece.
Oh, yes.
All right, as long as we're doing other transgender news, Fargo, North Dakota, a trans woman who's a hospital worker is suing for discrimination. She says she was forced to quit her job because she was so harassed and discriminated against. She was told she couldn't even hang her coat in the women's locker room.
The EEOC dismissed her complaint in September, and this is a new suit by Faye Seidler.
A couple of foundations, the Arcus Foundation and the Novo Foundation, have announced that they are putting together $20 million for a global trans initiative.
And this is for transgender-specific groups or groups led by transgender people, not just groups that work on the issue, as most of us do these days.
Yeah, around the world.
We told you about the trans woman who had her head bashed in on the curb in Jackson Heights, Queens, right outside her home at 4 o'clock in the morning about a week ago. So there were about 100 activists who turned out to protest and call attention to this. The police are classifying it as a domestic violence incident, even though the woman, Kathy Perez, 35, woke up from her unconsciousness and said, I didn't know who this was. And the police had already classified it as a domestic violence incident and therefore cannot be a hate crime, by the way.
Wow.
You can't have a hate crime when it's in domestic violence, even if it was. Whatever it was horrible violence.
It took us years to be able to prosecute rape within a relationship.
Yes. Within marriage.
Yeah, marriage. They wouldn't recognize that as a possibility.
Wow. In Rhode Island, the health insurance commissioner issued an order forbidding anti-trans discrimination as sex discrimination, including the availability of health insurance coverage and benefits, including transgender surgery and related health care services.
And a victory for a trans activist in the Bronx, Kim Watson. She...
I have a picture of her, yeah.
Yeah, she managed to avoid deportation to her original home of Barbados, where she proved she would have been attacked and faced enormous danger. So, and she's a great activist in the Bronx, and so she is safe here for a while.
Okay. In Arkansas, state officials there appealed the judge's order to let 3 same-sex couples amend their kids' birth certificates to include both parents. So we want a decision, but the state still won't cooperate.
Yeah, the clerks are rejecting it. They say they need more court orders. In Texas, a couple of things. First, a court said the state must pay $605,000 for the legal fees to the marriage plaintiffs, the people who successfully brought lawsuits against the state.
Right.
But Attorney General Ken Paxton of Texas is still fighting procedurally the recognition of a lesbian wedding in the state. The court said fine, but the Attorney General is still trying to find ways to disallow that.
In Kansas, more same-sex couples are facing discrimination from the Department of Children and Families. The agency recommended taking foster children away from lesbians who sought to adopt. The department received recommended a heterosexual couple over a lesbian couple, and the heterosexuals were arrested on child abuse charges, the ones that they recommended.
That's how all this came to light, and it turns out there was a court decision in 2013 that the decision has now been published, where the judge just lit into the Department of Children and Families for this written procedure and policy of we must take these children away from these same-sex couples. We cannot leave them there. They must. And there are couples who were told they were getting a child and half an hour later got a phone call saying, sorry, we're not giving you the child after all.
You know, the governor of Massachusetts, Michael Dukakis, right before he ran for president as a Democrat in 1988, made a big show of you must exhaust all heterosexual parents before you give a kid to a gay.
No matter how abusive they are?
Yes.
Wonderful.
In North Carolina, a suit versus the law allowing magistrates to opt out of performing marriages. 32 have taken advantage of this. It means they're not allowed to perform any marriages. And the people suing saying, you know, this is putting their religious rights over their oath of office.
Yeah, I thought at first it might just be a case or two here or there, but this is really growing exponentially. If 32 magistrates have recused themselves. I never thought I would be on the same page as Judge Richard Posner of Chicago, federal judge.
Republican.
Yeah. Republican, libertarian, quite conservative for many years, but less and less so these days. And he wrote a scathing piece about Scalia, the Supreme Court Judge Antonin Scalia, saying that he is, in essence, I don't think he used the word like I do, that he's treasonous, but that he is not following the Constitution.
Well, most of the New York City Council, most of the elected officials, including the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, are not following the Constitution either. They take a solemn oath to uphold not just the federal Constitution, which has the Establishment Clause, separation of church and state. The Constitution of the state of New York expressly forbids, in writing, any funds for denominational schools, religious schools, other than transportation. Now, we know that they've, chipped away at this a little bit.
They put nurses in the schools.
But now, Melissa Mark-Viverito, who's supposed to be a great liberal, she's the Speaker of the Council, says, this is landmark legislation. We're giving them $20 million so we'll reimburse them for security officers. Oh, we must have the safety of the children. It's so important. And I say to them, you've been a public official, some of you, for 20 years. Why is this important now? I mean, and you never thought about this before. Well, I mean, they're just, why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it because there are blocks now in New York of Orthodox Jewish and Protestant fundamentalist votes especially, and Catholics. You can't win an election citywide without them, and they will vote against you if you don't give them money. But when you take an oath of the Constitution, you need to turn to these people and say, I am not allowed to do this. But instead they say, oh, there's no problem with this. You know what they're doing?
Which compounds it.
They're taking $20 million of our money and buying votes for themselves. And I think you're all in disgrace, except for Danny Drum and Rosie Mendez and Inez Barron and Corey Johnson, our council member, came around on this and voted against it. But that's it. I'm furious about this.
I know, and I agree with you.
Okay. What else do we have?
Well, I'm also not impressed by the gay Republicans who are organizing to promote a friendlier Republican National Committee platform. And I'm not that impressed with the House Democrats who have introduced a resolution to make June 26th LGBT Equality Day, honoring the Supreme Court decisions in our favor. Why don't you fight for the Equality Act and get something actually in place? And, you know, women in combat, okay. I did read one analysis that said the Department of Defense is doing this now because they found they had no problems with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and so they figured they could do this too.
Maybe we'll be able to win a war. Also, people have suggested making women the ones on patrols for police functions. You'll probably have a lot less abuse out there with police.
Maybe, although I sometimes think that, you know, when you give women more power, they turn out to be human beings too.
Well, Chelsea Manning, speaking of women, the ACLU is in court fighting the U.S. government's motion to dismiss her fight for adequate medical care, citing the harm in delaying her treatment in prison. In far Texas, officials rejected 6-1 the petition from homophobic residents to rename Gay Drive. One petitioner said it embarrassed her kids. Another 50-year resident said she signed the petition but reconsidered. It used to mean happy. I prefer to think of it that way, but she worried about all the paperwork involved in changing the name.
Okay, can we move to international news? All right, let's run down some marriage and relationship news internationally. Chile, the government is promoting a discussion of legalizing same-sex marriage. That's a good thing.
Ireland passed a bill to make it illegal for teachers in religious schools to discriminate against gay teachers. Now, the Catholic Church runs most of the schools in Ireland, but they're state-funded. So that's why they're doing this. If you're a totally religious place, you support yourselves, you don't, you know. So
contrary to what's happening in the New York City schools and schools all over America where gay teachers are being fired by Catholic schools.
And this also protects divorcees and single parents in Ireland.
In Northern Ireland, they just had the hearing in a court case challenging the ban on same-sex marriage. They're expecting a ruling after Christmas.
In Venezuela, trans woman, we have a picture of her, Tamara Adrian, has been elected to the National Assembly. She's a lawyer and a member of the socialist-leaning Popular Will Party representing Caracas. The United Socialist Party of President Maduro lost its majority in the assembly.
In Slovenia, there's going to be a December 20th referendum on their marriage law. The parliament passed it, but it doesn't go into effect quite yet. So the right wing has succeeded in putting this referendum on the ballot. We are not in good shape there. The polls are against us, but we'll see what happens.
Australia has had some out gay senators. Now they have their first out member of the House, and he's a member of the Liberal Party, which in Australia is
the Conservative Party. But he supports marriage rights, but that's all in the hands of a public vote now, the plebiscite. So it's out of the hands of Parliament. Also in Australia, in Queensland, the Parliament there, the local Parliament, has restored civil partnerships after they were repealed in 2012.
In the Netherlands, 5 gay asylum seekers in Amsterdam were moved to another location after being spat on and attacked by other refugees. They're all from Syria, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. Earlier, the Justice Minister said he did not believe in segregated housing because it stigmatized them, but separate facilities are trending.
And also stigmatized in the Dominican Republic. You may remember the spats ongoing between Catholic Cardinal Rodriguez and our out gay U.S. Ambassador Wally Brewster. Brewster taking the high road, Cardinal Rodriguez most recently saying of Brewster, he should stick to housework since he is a man's wife. And also called him, as he has previously, a faggot. And he has also previously said gay tourists to the Dominican Republic are social trash and degenerates.
How about talking about the guy who was the Vatican ambassador to the Dominican Republic, who had to be brought back to the Vatican for trial for child molestation, and who died before he could stand trial?
For some reason, they're going after Brewster because he has directly challenged the corruption of the government, pointing out that U.S. businessmen had been held up by local cops who demanded their wallets.
Well,
evidently that annoyed the cardinal.
Well, that's part of what happens in Jamaica, and that's why Maurice Tomlinson has filed a constitutional challenge to the anti-buggery law, because he says it makes him a criminal for this, and police extort people and say, we're going to arrest you because you can get 10 years in prison at hard labor for buggery there. So he's challenging that in court.
More on the situation in Jamaica from Staceyann Chin in our upcoming interview.
In Brunei, U.S. officials met with Brunei officials and raised this new death penalty you have for sodomy and have called for them to adhere to international human rights standards.
As opposed to the situation in the Dominican Republic, a couple of other stories. In Malta, there's a Catholic bishop who is very pro-gay and is arguing for giving communion to gay people and to, divorced people and whatever. And he's in favor of couples, same-sex couples, and their kids and everything. And in India, there is a cardinal in Mumbai who is speaking out in favor of the decriminalization of homosexuality.
But in Armenia, the new constitution limits marriage to man-woman couples.
Yeah, which is a backward step. It used to be more liberal. And in Bermuda, a male couple has filed for marriage rights. They filed for marriage, and if they're rejected, they will sue. And the mother of one of them is a pastor and supports her gay son. And the British Undersecretary of State has urged United Kingdom territories to decriminalize homosexuality. And a court in Czechoslovakia has okayed the adoption of a child by a Czech-French gay male couple.
I'm glad I watched the show. I learned so much.
Well, we're hustling today, so you're learning it fast.
Okay. And AIDS news. In Cambodia, an unlicensed medic was sentenced to 23 years in prison for infecting 100 villagers with HIV by using unsanitized syringes. 10 have died. Maybe he should try all the health authorities and politicians who denied clean needles to addicts for decades around the world.
New information from the Centers for Disease Control. New infections with HIV are down, good news, in the last 10 years. Down in heterosexuals, down in IV drug users, down in white gay men, down in all women, down almost 50% in black women over the last 10 years. But young gay men, particularly black and Latino, are most of the new infections.
Which means we got to get people tested and on drugs to get them undetectable so that we can stop passing this around.
There has to, and you know why we have been talking about this for 30 years and still don't have the urgent campaign and the community outreach. You know, putting posters on subways is nice. I see those now all the time. But you got to go out into the community and really...
In the schools?
Yes, and have education and testing much more widely available.
Well, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, is getting a lot more support. We got a picture at Larry Kramer's house where GMHC got started in 1981 with the people who have been having disagreements over how to approach PrEP, and they issued a joint statement, some of whom had been at loggerheads with each other over this, and said it is a necessary component of an HIV prevention plan, and
should be available to all who want it at a lower price. They blasted Gilead for profiteering, and should be used in connection with condoms, and there should be treatment available for everybody and better health care. In the picture left to right was James Krellenstein and Peter Staley and Jim Igo in the back somewhere, and Larry Kramer and Matt Ebert.
Yes, and Anthony Fauci, who's the head of the NIH, said, Ray, PrEP, the argument is, we've got a picture of him, the argument is over for PrEP. If you use the drug, it works. He was speaking at the National HIV Prevention Conference.
Oh, Tony Fauci, right on top of things, as always. There was a report out of West Hollywood that they had not found anybody newly HIV positive for quite a while. Then there was some discussion of, maybe there were a couple of cases here and there. But they also report that PrEP use is up, which is a good thing. Not so good, Martin Shkreli, has once again...
Poster boy for raising drug prices.
I'm sorry I didn't raise the price of Daraprim even more. My investors
He reminds
are
me of
mad
Donald
at me.
Trump. If he's not in the papers every week, he has to think of something more outrageous and disgusting to say.
God.
But that's all on our government not getting all these pharmaceutical companies under control. Why do we let them act like the mafia and extort people for health?
Let them, we promote them in these trade agreements by wanting to extend their patents more and not allowing generic versions of their drugs to be more available to poor countries.
And Burt Reynolds says Charlie Sheen's getting what he deserved.
Oh,
but he says, but you know, I like his father.
Let's turn to something much more positive, and that is our guests, Cynthia Nixon and Staceyann Chin, star and director of MotherStruck, off-Broadway at the Culture Project, now in New York. Let us enjoy some time with them.
And we welcome our guests, Staceyann Chin and Cynthia Nixon. Staceyann, you are doing MotherStruck at the Culture Project, a powerful and deeply personal one-woman show. We would expect nothing less of you. And Cynthia, you're directing.
Yes.
So welcome. And of course, these folks really need no introduction. Cynthia Nixon, of course, is a winner of the Tony, the SAG Award, the Emmy Award, the Grammy Award, and the Vito Russo Award.
Yes.
We knew Vito.
Yes.
And Staceyann has been honored by almost every LGBT group you could name, from HRC to the immigration equality, et cetera. But we're here to talk about this show at the Culture Project, right there on Bleecker Street in Manhattan. At the Culture Project, MotherStruck, about the quest for motherhood.
Or being struck by motherhood, I suppose.
Exactly. So you've been here before. You're a wonderful, wonderful writer, performer, activist. You're in our opening title sequence. What specifically made you want to do this show? What did this come from?
Well, I say all the time that I'm not good at making up stories, but I like to write. So I write the things that happen to me, or the things that are happening around me mostly. And I've been lucky as a writer to have like the very dramatic things happen. I think if you're a memoir writer and then you have boring things happen to you, I don't know what you would do. But it's such a good thing that I've been left by many lovers, and abandoned as a kid, and had a dramatic, crazy pregnancy. I suppose the upside of having a crazy, dramatic life is that you get to make art of it, and people get to come in and see and weep and say, that happened to me. Oh my God, I would die if that ever happened to me.
And you wrote a blog about this on the Huffington Post, about your experience with pregnancy.
Yes, I started blogging. I think I was in the middle of IVF, and I was at a party, and I was kind of talking about how crazy the drugs made you, and how I'm not sure my girlfriend, who I thought was kind of in, wasn't in, and then she was in and then wasn't in, and then I was going crazy with the drugs, and I was trying to just do all kinds of things. It's like a crazy, crazy time. And I was saying it to a group of women, and one of the editors from Huffington Post says, you should write this down. You maybe should blog for us. And then I started blogging, and then things got crazier.
So how did you two come together as a team to work on this?
Well,
Tell the truth.
I've known Cynthia for a couple of years.
Well, we met back in 2001, right? 2001.
Yes.
When we were both on Broadway.
Yes.
And we met, and we met at a drama league luncheon.
Don't tell that story.
I shouldn't.
Yes, you should.
So I had been at Staceyann's opening night of Def Poetry Jam on Broadway, and I was knocked out by it, and I was knocked out by Staceyann in particular. And so I spotted her at this drama league luncheon, which is like a theater community thing, people on Broadway, off Broadway, all these different people. And so I just made a beeline for her to tell her how much I loved her in the show. And she was looking at me, and she was a little startled to be approached because she didn't know a lot of people there, because it was her first time on Broadway. And she was like, "You're on that show. I hate that show." And she went off. But she came around to find it, except for you. You're the only thing, And my publicist, who was there accompanying me, I mean, she just her jaw dropped, and she was like, "Oh my God, that's the rudest woman I've ever," And I was like, You got to understand, she paid me a tremendous compliment, you know. So that was that was called meeting cute.
Yes.
Meeting cute, and then I can't.
We did something at some
Symphony
kind of
Space.
reading, right?
We did about the 60s.
Right.
And we read other people's stuff.
Right, and
But
you were wearing cowboy boots.
I was wearing cowboy boots. And Staceyann had just written her amazing memoir, The Other Side of Paradise. And she happened to have a copy of it in her bag, and she gave it to me. And I had her email already, I think, from something. And I am not a reader. I do not read. It's a dirty little secret. You don't either? Yeah.
She reads plays.
Newspapers.
I read plays and I read the newspaper.
Yeah.
But I read it and I devoured it and I was knocked out by it. And I wrote her this very heartfelt, thing about this is one of the most astonishing things that I've ever read.
And I showed it to everyone. I read it aloud to everyone.
And then a few years passed.
Yes.
And then she emailed me, and she emailed me like I think she thanked me at the time, said, "Oh, like, thank you, I'm so glad you liked it." But then she wrote me another email like 2 years later, which was a response, was still like, it was like my old email was there saying, I'm in the process of writing a play, which was at that time called, what does it used to be called?
Are we going to say that in public?
Oh, okay, we can't say it. No,
It's a terrible name.
Okay, we're not gonna say in public. And I just wonder if you'd read it and sort of be a part of it as a producer or a director. And I read it right away, and I was like, wow, amazing. And I had not at that point directed anything. Now I have directed a few things.
Yes.
But I was like, we met, and I was like, I would love to direct this. And we really, we just started talking right away about her script, but also our experience as lesbian moms and in vitro fertilization and donors and known donors and miscarriages and do you know what I mean? Like all of the my experience with all that is not quite as dramatic as Staceyann's, but it had a lot of drama too, and we were amazed to find actually how many similarities that we had.
So Staceyann, pregnancy seems to moved you from being a critic of Sex and the City to a fan of the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Yes.
I mean, now we know you as one of the fiercest.
Must
But
all
it's
of
part of
this
your
be
show.
in the public
You're
ethos?
the
Part
one
of
who
your
put it out
show.
there.
I was stuck in bed forever. There was nothing on TV.
And you notice she doesn't watch Sex and the City.
and
She doesn't.
I noticed you didn't mention The View.
And Kenya.
My roommate
skipping
watched
right
Sex and the
over that,
City.
aren't we?
I get all kinds
And I,
of
of
like
course, as well.
heart palpitations when I watch The View because there's so many like varying viewpoints, and some of them really kind of like send me into like getting some kind of political aneurysm.
Exactly.
I want to jump through the screen and grab somebody, or like when somebody says something great, I'm like, yes. It's very high tension. Like
It is.
When I watch
But
it.
we should also say Rosie O'Donnell is also
Our producer.
Yes.
so.
Having found something more productive to do than Beyond the View.
Why are you guys bashing the poor View?
Always.
I love the
always.
View. I love the View personally.
Yeah, well, you have something invested in that.
I have
probably,
issues
we
with
don't.
some of the people on The View, and I don't know. If I ever
exactly.
see them, I will raise those issues.
Well, let's go back to, this is really an epic story, MotherStruck. In watching it, I was struck by how it built and how many twists and turns there were. And I wonder whether it is any kind of catharsis for you or what you get out of actually putting this out there as a play.
Well, I think when you kind of face your story, face your drama, face your pathology, you always get some sense of a greater understanding of it, and maybe it doesn't quite hurt as much the better your understanding of it becomes. But it kicks my bum every night. Some nights more than others, but every night I get up there, I have to kind of pay tribute to like all the characters in the story, and I have to tell the story about the beginning of this kid. And every night I question myself, like, is this a good thing? Like, you're putting all of her beginnings out in the world. And
Has she seen it?
Has she seen the show? I mean, I don't know. I think she's seen. Like,
Not really. I mean, she's been around at rehearsal a little bit, but
yeah, but I don't think
it's not really for a 4-year-old.
It's not for a 4-year-old, and I don't think she'd be interested in sitting still for an hour and a half watching her mother.
Oh, come on.
Other people might be, but she's like, I see her all the time.
Well,
There's no real.
you can see them together on YouTube.
In the living room protest, yes.
Yes, she's a beautiful child. I want to turn the corner a little because, Cynthia, now that we have the opportunity to have you here, I have to ask about how you feel about having become this celebrity lesbian.
It's very nice. I mean, I like it. You meet a lot of interesting people.
Yes.
No, it's been great. I mean, even before I was dating Christine, now I'm married to Christine. I was always in a very gay world. It was more of a male gay world than a lesbian world. But it's just, the people are amazing. It's just a great culture, and it's a culture that I always sort of was in as an honorary member a little bit, and now I'm in as an actual card-carrying member. So, that's nice.
And both of you, of course, but I want to start with you. Political activist is such a major part of your life. We were talking beforehand about your father as a journalist.
Yeah.
Does this come from your youth? Where did you become?
Yes, I think it comes from both of my parents, but much more so from my father. I mean, I think my father grew up in a very little town in Texas, and I think he didn't really like Texas. And, he longed to come to New York. It was in the 50s, and things were happening, and I think he was particularly energized and excited by the Black Civil Rights Movement. And, I think he felt like the people, some of the people around him in Texas, and some of the things they thought and said, and that those were not his people. And he came to New York to find his people. And he was he's a cynic. He was a cynic, my father. He was not an idealist, but he was deeply, deeply interested in politics. And both my parents, very against the war, and so yeah, and pro-choice and all of these things, and involved in local politics a little bit. Yeah.
And Staceyann, you have a very complicated story. It's not just about you becoming a mother, but about your dealing with your own mother and your relationship with her, someone who abandoned you when you were a child in Jamaica, and you chart all that through this as well.
Yes, I think that we all have, whether you were raised by the most perfect parents in the world, or whether your parent did a number on you. I think that becoming a parent is always charged with so much. Like you're always wondering, am I doing it right? Am I making the right choices? You kind of figure out. Like I kind of knew that I knew what not to do, but I'm not quite sure I knew what to do. And so, being inside of this relationship with this kid and writing about it and kind of trying to make peace with what happened with my own mother, being a mother now, I think, has given me some amount of empathy for her. She was 23 years old with 2 children and living in poverty, and she had a way out, and she took it. And so the child in me, of course, is deeply saddened by that and hurt by that. But the feminist in me is like, I can understand why she would make a choice to save herself. Because there's this idea that when you're a mother, you're supposed to sacrifice everything for the kid. And I'm not always certain that, 1, people are able to do that, or 2, that it is fair to ask people to do that. Maybe we should have communities that, are able to better support women. Maybe,
Like a village?
Yeah, something like a village, yeah, or at least a social welfare system that does more for us than it does now.
And this is also about your relationship with your home country, Jamaica.
Yes,
which
yes.
you start off, and some of that stuff reminded me of when you did Border Clash years ago, that story about having to leave Jamaica under very extremely difficult circumstances. People will see the show and see it.
And you go back now, off and on, and I wonder whether you notice any evolution in the situation there.
Certainly. I mean, the voices of the LGBT community in Jamaica has certainly been amplified by the international conversation around LGBT rights globally. What has happened, I think, is visibility has increased, and the conversation around Jamaica, human rights organizations, the work they do there, the work that local LGBT activists on the island are doing. I think all of that kind of stirs the pot, and it has to move, it has to progress, it has to grow. But there are still lots and lots and lots of people who live beneath the poverty line, who live in rural spaces, who live in highly religious communities, who are under great duress and are every day navigating great danger in claiming this identity of being LGBT. And so for myself, I think now that I'm outside of Jamaica and I can go home and maybe carve a safer space for myself for the visit, I find that my own experiences are not deeply, I don't experience a lot of homophobia or a lot of discrimination or violence. What I experience is maybe violent language. You know, I remember going home to Jamaica and driving in a cab up to the university, and the cab driver says, "You know what? You're going up to the university. Don't go up there. There are only a bunch of gay people up there. You have to stay away from there. They will make you gay." And,
Well,
and
at
I
least you
didn't raise it. You know,
At
I
least you didn't say faggots.
Hey,
Well.
I had the elevator operator in my building said that to people coming up to a party at my house. He was a little under the influence, I think. Oh, you don't want to go in there. But speaking of wanting to be somewhere, a lot of this is about where do I want to be? You know, I'm in Brooklyn. It's becoming gentrified. It's, you know, I came here. It was a up and coming thing. And do I want to go somewhere else? What about what's going on in this country these days? I mean, you left Jamaica because it was untenable for you. What about what's going on? I'd ask you both. What about what's going on right now in this country, anti-immigrant, et cetera?
A couple of years ago, I think I read an article in the Times that said more people of color moved out, particularly black people, more people of color moved out of New York City that year than had moved in since pre-emancipation.
Wow.
And that says something about what is happening to the city. I mean, I'm by no means, you know, living below the poverty line here, and I'm struggling financially to figure out what's happening with my own life and the space that I live in. New York is changing in a very kind of Disney high-rise, and Brooklyn is fast following that Manhattan trend. Mm-hmm. And so many of my friends have left, people with children, people without children, because you just can't afford it. But then again, that universal question, I imagine people in Texas, and people in you know, Jamaica, people in Florida, people in Germany are themselves contemplating the question of where do I live now? Where do I live my life? Where do I raise my kid? Because, you know, the world has become quite local in that people move around. I mean, it's not odd for someone to pick up and go halfway across the world for a job, for school, for a partnership anymore. So people are always asking themselves, is this where I want to live? And maybe the issue, maybe having a kid forces you to ask the question more urgently, but it's definitely a question that I've been asking myself a long time, and I'm just forced to answer it, at least for the now, when you have a kid.
And and Cynthia, you have
you're
3 kids.
diehard.
You
I'm
have
never
3
leaving.
kids, and
Yes.
you know, how are you feeling about where?
Yeah, I mean,
to
I
be
think,
raised?
but I think it's interesting what Staceyann just said about how people now are so mobile, so much more mobile than they were even just a few years ago. And I think that that's part of what's happening. Is like you used to, I mean, people have always flooded into New York, and some people leave, you know, but it's sort of like the city was its own entity, and you had the different classes within that own city, and the rich people who lived here were the rich people of New York. Nowadays, as we become really one global community, it's sort of like, you know, how in Venice, unless you're, I guess, super, super, super rich, you don't live in Venice if you're a person of Venice. You live in a nearby island, and you come into work. And the only people who live in Venice are the ultra-rich and international jet setters who have apartments in a number of cities across the world, and hotels or, you know, Airbnbs, you know, people whose job it is to rent out to international visitors who want to come for 3 days or want to come for 3 months or whatever. And so people looking for affordable housing in New York have always had to compete with all the many people and many people of wealth in New York. But now people looking for housing here are having to compete with people in every country who think it might be fun to have an apartment in New York, or it might be fun to, have a place where I can go and stay, for however long. And I mean, I think, I'm very on the fence about the Airbnb. I mean, on the one hand, I see it has advantages, and I see if you're a homeowner, how it could be a way to earn a little extra money for you. But I actually feel like what's happening more and more is these are not individual homeowners. These are investors who are buying up all this apartment stocks and renting it out to wealthy people from Switzerland who want to come for a week. So it's not it's amazing to me how much of the housing of New York is not for people anymore who actually live in New York.
And people who have families, that becomes even more acute. Because whereas my apartment worked for me when I was just by myself, now that I have a kid, I need a door, I need a space for her, and then all of a sudden I have the same salary, but I need more space. And my city is becoming more and more expensive. So then it becomes like just a really difficult space for you to live with a family.
And do you expect to be politically active in the next year with the horror of the Trump era upon us?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's crazy and it's fascinating. And I have to say, earlier I don't know if you know this play, A Bright Room Called Day.
I know of it.
It's Tony Kushner's very first play that he wrote. And it's about a group of friends who are communists in 1932 and 33 in Germany, and Weimar Germany. And it's about the rise of Hitler and the falling off of the far left. And then there's a character in Reagan's America who was very, very, very angry about Ronald Reagan and writes him these poison pen letters every day and compares him to Hitler and says, of course, nothing ever can stack up to Hitler, but does that mean we can't draw parallels? And what was really eerie as we were, rehearsing and doing this reading on Monday is how much of the issues of the play are just completely reflected in Donald Trump. Not that naive though I may be, not that I think that Donald Trump is actually going to get anywhere. I don't think.
Who knows?
But the fact that he is getting so much play and so many people who are thrilled to have someone saying this for them and that will stand up and cheer for him. I mean, I feel like even as a child, I remembered when Ronald Reagan, AIDS and everything else aside, how we had a president. We've come so far from ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. We had a guy who was like, it's okay to be selfish and think about yourself and put yourself in front of other people. Let's be honest about that. That it's you first, and then if there's anything left over, other people can have it. I mean, I feel like remembering how Reagan really opened the floodgates for people to be like, Reagan Democrats. Like, yeah, I've always voted Democratic before, but that guy's got a point. And I feel like, wow. And then you look from Reagan to Trump, and it's just like, yeah, let's make a list of every Muslim person. I mean, it's just it's shocking how fast this stuff can happen.
How just below the surface it is all the time and gets provoked.
Yeah.
And in addition to all this, you're also in the play. You also deal with dating while pregnant.
Just to make a sharp turn.
Well, to make a sharp turn because there's
but you're right.
so many
Let's bring it
elements
back
in
to the play as we're winding this up because the play is
the Culture
really
Project.
Yes, cultureproject.com
or
for more information, as we say.
.org.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think whenever you're dealing with making a family, there's the assumption that you make a family, you get a partner. Even within the queer community, you have, you're supposed to get your person.
More and more these days, yeah.
He, she, or in between, zir, whatever you whatever gender pronoun is preferred. You're supposed to get your person, and then you mix up the lemonade, and then you can make the baby. So whenever it is that you either have the kid before or you're trying to have the kid outside of the union, there's always a kind of weird disconnect between what it is that people are willing to support or what it is that people are willing to understand. so it's almost like you're doing it backwards, and so everything, your community, all the conversations, everything doesn't support the notion.
Well, you deal with all of this in MotherStruck, which
Yes.
really is a fascinating epic, which officially opens
On Monday the 14th.
Okay.
Monday, December 14th.
just in time.
And is running in previews now.
Yes, and congratulations, and best of luck with it.
Thank you.
And how long is it going to be on until? You have a,
I
it's
think
going
that
to
there's
Broadway
It's going
in
to Broadway.
January.
5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No, I think right now we're selling tickets for 8 weeks, total of 8
Okay,
weeks.
great.
Yeah.
At the Culture Project at Bleecker and Lafayette.
Motherstruck.com.
.org?
Org.
Staceyann Chin on YouTube with her daughter, Cynthia Nixon, everywhere. I go to the play Sunday and go home and see you in the affair.
Yes, yes, it's true. And I've got a movie out, James White, now. That's a really
yes,
gorgeous
getting
film.
a lot
of
of good
attention.
buzz,
Yes, and I
yes.
have another play that I've directed called Steve, which is at the New Group,
Yes.
which is about a group of 6 gay friends. And-
Brilliantly reviewed,
Yeah, yeah.
and we loved Rashida speaking,
Thank
which
you.
was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank
So
you.
thank you both for coming in.
Thank you for
It's a
having us.
pleasure.
so I love MotherStruck, but I only survived 2 hours with Al Pacino in China Doll, the new David Mamet play. It's about Al Pacino as a rich thug who gets hoisted on his own petard. It's not as terrible as I'd been led to believe, but the big problem is that David Mamet is out of ideas.
Aren't we all?
And the few lines that get some audience reaction are not new insights, they're cliches. And Mamet basically hates his audience now, so it's not a plus for this playwright.
Well, I'm here to identify a new phenomenon on television, the trans wedding planner.
Oh, okay.
Candace Kane.
Used to be the gay wedding planner.
Yes, now it's the trans. Candace Kane, the trans woman who used to be on an ABC primetime series and is best friends now with Caitlyn Jenner, showed up on The Young and the Restless as a wedding planner.
Okay.
Not the best actress in the world, but we'll see if she develops. And there's, Bravo has a show called The Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce, and they have a wedding planner newly on that show who might be a gay man or might be a trans man. I haven't figured out which yet.
Maybe they haven't figured it out yet.
Maybe.
But the Broadway Cares Equity Fights has figured out to do the best thing of the holidays is their Gypsy of the Year competition. It's such a heartwarming show. Broadway is such a wonderful community. There's so much love there. I mean, I'm going to sound cliche-ish saying all these things, but it was great.
To the anonymous viewer who asked me if I had seen Listen to Me, Marlon, yes, I have. And no, I haven't seen Spotlight yet, but Andy has, and he liked it. And thank you to Cynthia and Staceyann for coming in. MotherStruck, go to cultureproject.org for more information, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.